Hello, Mustangs. This is your proud superintendent, Dr. Edward Vincent. Happy Black History Month. The term Black History Month feels a bit different this year. The tragic deaths of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, as well as the armed invasion of the U.S. Capitol, showcased for all Americans what all persons of color have been contending with for a long time. The systemic discrimination, social injustice, and physical persecution of Black and brown-skinned Americans. Simultaneously, COVID-19 ravaged our nation, but particularly plagued communities of color, exemplifying the racial disparities in healthcare. Black History Month is a time to celebrate the many accomplishments of Black Americans of the past, but also to hear the voices of the present, to pave the way for progress, justice, and equal opportunity. Former First Lady Michelle Obama famously stated, "My girls live in a house built by slaves." Some people were offended by this reference to the White House, but her statement was factual. For too long, our conversations about Black history have remained surface level at best. We have built museums and honored some historical African American figures, but have not truly delved into the full history of our nation and the work that needs to be done. As a teacher and as a woman of color, born and raised in West Medford, I must provide a brief history of Black history in our city. Medford has connections to the beginning and end of slavery. According to the Medford Historical Society, the first slaves arrived on February 26, 1638, from Tortugas, West Indies, on a ship commanded by Captain William Pierce. When he arrived in Medford, he brought with him a cargo of cotton, tobacco, salt, and Negroes. That surely was a different time, but it is part of our history. You all may have been by the Royal House, home of Isaac Royal Sr., a prosperous merchant who ran a sugar plantation in Antigua and traded slaves and rum. He moved to Medford with his family in 1737. He brought with him 27 enslaved individuals, but it is said that over 60 slaves have lived in the slave quarters of the Royal House today. This spot is historically significant because it is the only surviving slave quarters in all of Massachusetts. Medford also has connections to the abolitionist movement. Belinda Royal was an ex-slave who successfully sued her former owner's estate, Mr. Royal, for a pension. Also from Medford, Mr. Prince Hall, a free Black man and leading 18th century abolitionist, founded the Black Freemasonry. Later, Medford would become a stop on the Underground Railroad. Mr. George Luther Stearns, an abolitionist and wealthy industrialist, helped to provide a network of safe houses and secret routes that slaves used to escape to free states in the North and Canada. Between the Civil War and the early 1900s, Black families began settling in West Medford, establishing one of the oldest African American neighborhoods in the United States. In the middle 1960s, my own parents immigrated from Haiti and purchased a home on Sharon Street. I grew up in this neighborhood that emphasized self-sufficiency, education, and a strong work ethic. I am sure many of you, as I have, played at Duggar Park and at the West Medford Community Center. I attended both the Hervey and St. Raphael schools. My life revolved around our wonderful neighborhood. Like so many of you, I am a proud West Medford Mustang. Another famous educator that I would like to honor during this Black History Month is Madeline Duggar Andrews. Many of you may have attended the Andrews School, but I am not sure that you all are familiar with the school's namesake. Like me, Madeline Duggar Andrews also grew up in West Medford and worked hard in school and college to become a teacher. She faced hurdles and was refused a job in the Medford schools because of her race. So instead, she taught in the Boston public school system. She always wanted to work to improve education in Medford. So in 1963, she successfully ran for the position on the Medford School Committee. She was the first African American woman to ever run for such a position in Massachusetts, and she was successful. Once elected, she worked hard on many issues, but particularly strived to create racial balance in Medford. It is her mission that we need to continue today. As a country, we have much work to do to create a more just, equitable, and unified society. As we emphasized this summer, everyone must do their part. In the Medford Public Schools, we are committed to engaging in conversations that will promote understanding across lines of division, supporting our students to lead as upstanders against hate, and acting decisively to address racist beliefs, practices, and systems. I am so proud to see the advocacy work that many members of the Medford Public Schools community are doing. I know that all of you, Mustangs of today, will make history and work hard with me to bring forth much needed change. And I will close with a few lines from the acceptance speech of Vice President Kamala Harris, who, as you know, broke barriers this year by being the first woman, the first person of color, as well as the first person of East Asian descent to be elected to the second highest position in our government. She read, "To the children of our country, regardless of your gender, our country has sent you a clear message. Dream with ambition, lead with conviction, and see yourself in a way that others might not see you, simply because they've never seen it before. And we will applaud you every step of the way. Let's make history, Mustangs." Happy Black History Month.
The ally. The origin of one's name is salient, but it won't always be the common one. They can be rare and may seem different. Diversity is a beautiful thing. Names reflect the colors of one's culture. They open doors to new ideas and thoughts. Embrace someone who doesn't look like you. Diversity is a beautiful thing. Be the ally who takes time to listen and unites us with love and happiness.
Hello, my name is Austin Price and I wrote this poem, Fear Does Not Define Us. We got black people getting shot in their cars. That leaves the family battling, but the only thing they get from it is battle scars. Police rely on their weapons when it should be their voice. They act like we're animals we don't understand, but in reality, we're all made of the same thing, blood, flesh, and bone. But once they pull that trigger, there is no get back. Life is not a video game. There's no responding. Looking into my future, my life is at risk. I'm a young black male trying to make it in life, but me succeeding to some people will even more want them to take my life away because they don't want to see on TV a young black male has changed the world, and that's not right. We all should be equal, no matter if we're black or white.
The quote I looked at today in class was, if we want to get to the place where all lives matter, then we have to make sure that Black lives matter too, which was said by Alicia Garza, who is one of the women that who founded the Black Lives Matter movement. I had an immediate strong connection with this quote because I agree with what she is saying and how this has been an ongoing problem in our history that needs to be stopped and come to an end. We have said for so long we are a free country and everyone is safe and free. Yet you see and hear about all these injustices and horrible acts that make this false and actually flip and alter that phrase to become the phrase, only some of us are free rather than all of us. I think this is very important that she rose up and spoke of this because it has allowed me and many others that have been affected by this problem of racial injustice, whether it be through yourself experiencing it or through loved ones, feel like you're not alone and you have many people fighting along with you for this cause. What also makes this quote carry so much positive weight is knowing that she is the founder of the Black Lives Matter movement. We know of the injustices and struggles of women alone trying to fight for equality. So to have a woman step up and raise awareness through a movement that is now being felt worldwide is also a very big deal. Through her many books she has written and she has shown she is determined and will never give up until equality is achieved, and this makes me feel like we need more people like Alicia Garza.
Left and down, right and down, left. Oh, no. Wait. Oh, wait. Some of you are like this. No, you cannot be lost like, no, don't do that. If we said arms up, you all have an arm, so you can use it. Trust me. So this morning I'm also inspired by a friend of mine who used to live with me, travel the world with me. Now he's fighting for his life at Boston Medical right now. So I'm inspired by him because he was such a big mover. So I wanted to really help me support his energy. So I do not want you to be like, you're not scared, you're not in 10th grade. I remember I was in 10th grade just a few years ago. And I was completely curious about how can I do it. That's why I got my scholarship. In my 10th grade, I got my first scholarship to go to New York. So let's do this figure forward. So when you go down, you really go down like a lunge. Yeah, you all do gym classes here, so we're gonna go right here. When we go sideways, we're gonna closer too. Okay, so let's do that with a real energy, please. I need you. I really need you. 5, 6, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 1. And up. And down. Right there. Left, left. And get bravo. 1 and 2. Bravo. 3 and 4. Right arm. Right and down. Left and down. Right and down. Let's go again. 3 times. Great job. Let's go. Now equal. 1, 2, 1. Let's move as we go. Let's go. I don't see you yet. Leave it on. Now equal.
Good afternoon, everyone. First off, thanks to Michael Skorka and Miss Rose Walker for their invitation and their welcoming spirit. This is the second invite I've received to come back to my old high school, and I like being in poetic partnership with CCSR and Michael, Miss Sunye and Max Heinig, and Superintendent Edward Vincent, and the list goes on. I think that it's highly commendable that the administration has made a deliberate decision to provide this student body with a relevant message in honor of Black History Month. And I'm honored to be given the opportunity to help share such a message. I come to you this afternoon as a mostly finished product of the city of Medford. Medford has long been regarded as a blue-collar city of industry where a strong work ethic and a will to be better has always been a part of the fabric of its communities, black, white, and brown. West Medford has been the historical heart of the African American community in Medford since just after the Civil War. It remains a proud, but increasingly less black and brown neighborhood. Still, it has an amazing story to tell, and I spend a lot of time and energy telling it. Although I live on the South Shore of Boston today, I will always consider Medford, particularly West Medford, my home. My faith, my values, and my life philosophy has been informed in great measure by its unique Mystic River landscape, with all of its bends, twists, and turns. I don't have an awful lot of time to talk with you today, so please pardon me if I dispense with additional pleasantries and launch right into what I came to share. I want to speak briefly on what I've come to recognize about the neighborhood I come from and what it means to be a product of the village. It's probably not what you think it would be, but it frames what I believe about how important it is to establish, cherish, and celebrate communities of like-minded people. If you've heard this story before, I hope that you'll hear something this time that you may have missed the last time. Hired by the Mystic. They gave my people the lowlands and not much of it, just a few streets hard by the river. Banks turned a blind eye behind the red lines, and it wasn't about the money. Class was an irresistible force. Race was an immovable object. Perhaps it wasn't a written rule, but white folks knew the legal tool to keep us in our place in this Mystic Valley space, where slaves and rum and ships had built some mansions, made some millionaires, and hid some old money. So it was hard by the Mystic we went, muddy and a bit turned down, the only place where one could be brown in this ancient Middlesex County town. But we named it, we claimed it, we made it our own. Even in the heat of summer, when the shores were parched and the soil was rank with the decay of aquatic alchemy, we were one with the river. We followed its flow to the lakefront and the sandy beach. Like our own Jordan Shore, we baptized and blessed our brothers and sisters in Christ. We caught the little fishes to go with our loaves of bread and became the teeming multitude who our Lord Jesus fed, hard by the Mystic. We became community. We commanded unity. We embraced the children and raised them up in the way they should go. As the river ebbs and flows, the tides will turn and our fortune grows. A few more streets become our home. Houses on Sharon join kin on Jerome. From Duggar Park to the railroad tracks, the landed folk make more room for blacks. The color line recedes a bit. Church and school and center sit. The Ville becomes the heart of it, hard by the Mystic Shores. Now the worm has surely turned, and folks who left have surely learned things couldn't stay the same. The muddy Mystic most days is clean, the banks are freshly cut and green. Faces once distinctly brown are not the only ones in town. These streets that once were our confines must now embrace what gentry defines: condominium culture, bedroom convenience, university sprawl, access, egress, excess, and largesse. Now those lowlands have become the highlights of a trending city. And sometimes that success isn't pretty when it's at the expense of your black and brown and tan family. And yet the river still turns and bends from where it begins to where it ends. The only place where one could be brown in this ancient Middlesex County town, where we named it and claimed it and made it our own. You see, sometimes it's not about the challenges you face. It's about how you face the challenges. That's why I'm excited to be speaking with you today. The current times we're living in are indeed challenging. In Medford, like most of the cities and towns in Massachusetts, getting together for any kind of celebration, let alone for something as difficult to define as Black history, has become complicated, if not downright impossible. So I'm glad we're having this virtual rendezvous and that I got invited. Now I'm a Medford kid, from my baby toe to my long gone afro. This is my origin story. I talk a lot about this in my poetry and when I speak locally. There's history here, and lots of it. Some of that history is a tale of race and exclusion, and much of it is seldom spoken of. I had the opportunity to speak a few years ago at the dedication of the long overdue slave memorial at the city's Salem Street burial ground. I'm still amazed at what 4 young people from our public schools accomplished in getting that monument placed. I shared a piece called Medford Bound at the reception. Please allow me to share it with you as well. Medford Bound. This Mystic Valley Medford town has a legacy in black and brown, buried by means we can't recount, though evidence begins to mount as we celebrate this sacred place, so separate from the white man's space. Elegant stones adorn those grounds where ne'er a slave could be interred, and no laments were ever heard. Manicured green, all shaped and mown, not like these, rough and overgrown. Crypts of marble and granite too, where men of station receive their due. Brooks and tufts and royal accrue, names that ring in legend true. They put these patterns into play and moved their Negroes out the way. In death it was as done in life, a servant's yoke would end in strife. Invisible to all who mattered, interred in fields so mean and tattered, akin to ashes, blindly scattered. The landed gentry built the ships, captains and clan made ocean trips, a threefold brew, molasses, slaves, and rum, a hardened crew, a journey yet to overcome. Drums that beat across the frothy seas, diasporas chattel on their fearful knees. Sons and heirs of the motherland, pressed beneath the slaver's hand, the colonizer's stern command. And yes, a Medford tie would bind the African soul to the master's mind. Men of wealth and status, men of means and matters, African kinship bruised and shattered, iron chains remained in place, servitude lodged in this mystic space, cane and spirits distilled to taste. The census of 1754 shows 49 blacks at Medford's door. A few were free, but never many. Prior tallies showed hardly any. As early as 1641, a legal bondage in Medford won a place in the body of liberties. Whites brought black humanities. All had handlers and daily work, and dared not dawdle, loaf, or shirk. So Pomp built the wall for Thomas Brooks, not to be found in your history books. Washerwomen, cooks and bakers, masons, smiths, and skilled sailmakers, shipwrights, weavers, and laundry maids, nose to the plow in 100 trades. Few would distinguish beyond these chains, though one would come to fabled gains. A Bayesian prince bound for America embraced black men of faith and character. This yearning created a Mason's order with an English charter from Cumberland's border. From across the Atlantic, a cherished scroll that white Freemasonry couldn't control. A man of Medford, at least for a time, his legacy both strong and sublime, claimed by Cambridge and Boston too, Prince Hall's fame was just and true. Then there was brave Belinda Sutton, who really pushed the master's button. A royal to some, a caution to others, she paved a path for beleaguered brothers, addressing inequity's sad condition, famous for drafting a bold petition. She sued for wages denied in serving to whites of means, wholly unnerving. A lineage of slaves has subtle beauty, exposing blacks of strength and duty, hard by the shores of the mystic river, like arrows in Pawtucket's quiver. Such are the stories of Medford town, where chattel lives wore skin of brown. Rough-hewn stones in this rustic spot now sing of a Medford forget-me-not. This mystic valley maker's town has a legacy of black and brown, buried in ways we can't recount, though proof is bubbling to the fount, as we celebrate this sacred place, a cautionary tale of race. We are in the midst of unprecedented change in the metropolitan hubs and urban centers of America. Employment, education, transportation, green energy initiatives, fair housing access, economic advantage, real estate values are major drivers of these changes. Most weekdays, from my desk at the West Medford Community Center, I can feel the change daily. I take a regular walk around those 3 or 4 streets that used to be the only ones where we could actually have homes, and what do I see? Condos, co-ops, luxury apartments, new duplexes, and a changing of the guard. Suffice it to say, it's not quite the village we built anymore. Still, I want you to have a sense of the neighborhood I grew up in. We called it the Ville. Here's an ode or tribute piece I wrote some years ago for my first book of poetry, Brown Skin and the Bread of Life. It's called Ode to the Ville. Ode to the Ville. I'll tell you a story, and most of it's true. Forgive my memory if I've forgotten you. It's a memory that we all share of a place that's loved beyond compare. Keeping it classy for the Medford folk, we were the Ville, and that's no joke. Lots of heroes we can claim. The list is long and great the fame. Madeline, Franklin, Buddy, and Walter made some gains that time can't alter. Whitfield, Charles, and Rudy Smith add to this distinguished list. Then Mayland married Mr. Fields, and a White House connection was nicely sealed. From Duggar Park to Plaisted, and everything in between. Harvard Ave, Jerome Street, too. Y'all know what I mean. Wolfie and those Campbell boys, original regulators. The Eddies, Lawrence, Witt, and Lockett handled all the haters. Remember Faustina's beauty shop? Sent the wives home, true beauties for pop. Humpty cut heads for many a year in that tiny shop on Jerome Street, you hear? Hoops in the hood till long after dark. Always a game at Duggar Park. Serious ballers, the Clayton brothers and Stevie Douglas, Lace, Reg Graham, and many others. Duggars and Kellys and Isaacs too charted a path for me and you. Hoops in the hood till long after dark. Always a game at Duggar Park. More than a little weed got smoked. No names here, but many toked. Passed the bottle for the brothers departed. A little mad dog and the party got started. Funky beats at the center spot. Always a happening, but man was it hot. Sweat out your afro, mess up your do. Watching the booty that's bumping with you. Godfather, P-Funk, Ohio players. Always a jam for the back in the days. Royston, Cy, and Carol Sharpton led the center and set it apart from the average and the ordinary to a place that groomed the extraordinary. A place to play the whole day long. Pool cues, pride, and a lot of song. Check out the sky, the scouts in blue and gold. Always prepared and a little bit bold. Pack 428, West Medford pride. A merit badge on the chocolate side. Now rebuilt in greater splendor, a legacy we must remember. Make sure you get your membership. Don't let our legacy lose its grip. Arlington, Sharon, and Lincoln Streets, home to some famous Ville heartbeats. Doc Counts told the story well of generations that heard the bell to gather in this mystic town and make a home distinctly brown. 100 years of families looked to the heavens and fell on their knees. Duggars, Kellys, and Isaacs too charted a path for me and you. Keeping it classy for the Medford folk, we were the Ville, and that's no joke. We always had that musical vibe. Alan taught Terry to keep it alive. There's Billy and Sonny so cool on the sax, and Jackie Wood singing the Motown facts. At gospel time for the saints on the scene, memories of Conrad and Cecily Dean. Brother Phil brings us a distinctive new flavor. His silky smooth voice is one we now savor. Artistic vision, the world can see. Remember Harriet Kennedy? Now take a look at that sand-finished ceiling. Here's a fact that's worth revealing. Vonnie plastered most every home, from Boston Ave to the end of Jerome. Me and Jordan tried it some, but man, that rock lath weighed a ton. They say the strong men keep on coming. My dad did ceilings. He didn't do plumbing. It's about those streets where we laughed and played. It's about that church where our family prayed. It's about that school where we learned it all, and Duggar Park where we played some ball. Every adult knew every child and would light them up for acting wild. Seldom did you see neglect. DSS didn't come a-calling. No timeouts, no pit bull maulings. The Ville, where life was a true inkwell. Every clan had stories to tell. Doc Counts kept the history of Medford's chocolate mystery, riding his bike with papers and files, telling our stories across the miles. Simple pleasures, too many to mention, though here's a few more for your attention. Penny candy at the little store, pickles and hot dogs and so much more. Building models and cooking classes at the center where many a good day passes. The soda fountain at Kale's drug shop, a bag of canes and an ice-cold pop. Simple pleasures, too many to mention. A pound of cure and an ounce of prevention. Not to say we didn't suffer. Love's not always a perfect buffer. Many left the scene for good, but never left the neighborhood. We had our share of tragedy, like the Sunnyhurst murder in '73. Mike Haywood died near the railroad track. Hilarious brother we never got back. Norma Jeffers, a beautiful life. Mother, troop leader, friend, and wife. Her Girl Scouts and her brownies, too, reflected quality through and through. But the loss of our friends was never the point. The strength of our families made this place the joint, allowed us to mourn as together we stood, without forsaking the neighborhood. You can take the homeboy out of the Ville, but the voice of his hometown remains in his will. Keeping it classy for the Medford folk, we were the Ville, and that's no joke. Shiloh Baptist, the one church for most, laid the foundations for many to toast. Weddings, baptisms, and hallelujah, hallelujah. OG saved me. Did he save you too? West Medford Baptist, 2 blocks away. We knew that this was the Father's Day. After church, the youth be migrating to kung fu flicks and roller skating. The Regent, the Cap, and the Ballaroo. I'd be hanging out. What about you? Tom Wolfe said that you couldn't go home. I'm disputing that claim with this little poem. Johnny Reed dreamed up the Ville reunion, and we come from all corners to seek a communion. Block parties and the Lobster Fest, the neighborhood spirit at its best. Simple pleasures, too many to mention, retired well on a government pension. Parents who raised their kids' too, in homes they know, owned through banks they knew. We love those homes in the Mystic Valley, for Lincoln Street just cut up the alley. Off of Jerome by Humpty's shop, fade in the sides just a bit off the top. Keeping it classy for the Medford folk. We are the Ville, and that's no joke. So, I do want to spend a few minutes exploring the larger theme of Black history with you tonight. I think it's important as our country moves forward to continue to honor the outstanding contributions of African Americans to the city of Medford, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and these United States. Again, I came as a poet. I've written 5 books, and each one contains a liberal dose of historical perspective about the achievements of people of color in the U.S. Here's a selection from Book 5. It's called I Speak for These. I speak to the history of all our people, from the cotton fields to the church's steeple, from the silent slave gates at lowly Goree to the Tuskegee Airmen's corps d'esprit. From the tales of Anansi, the clever spider, to Barack Obama, our White House insider. From kings and queens who refused to grovel to Alex Haley's epic Roots novel. I speak for Brown Bessie Coleman, who always had her head in the clouds, way before white wings gave flight and women of color so endowed. I speak for Eleanor Fagin, who truly changed the game, to own the night as Lady Day when she first changed her name. I speak for the waymakers and the earth shakers and the mold breakers, finders of new beauty in natural wonder in simple jars of clay. I speak for the Jubilee singers who sailed to foreign fame and brought back all the proceeds to light the Fiskite flame. I speak for the Buffalo soldiers who helped to tame the West, brave heroes known by native sons respected as the black man's best. I speak for the Negro Leaguers who couldn't color America's game, Josh, John Henry, and cool Papa Bell, gigantic talent before Jackie came. I speak for Sister Rosetta, who sowed the seeds of rock and roll. No one was ever better. She sold the world a sound of soul. I speak for the faithful engineers and the clever inventive pioneers and the four-star brilliant brigadiers, all with talent beyond their peers. I speak for Sojourner and Harriet, sisters of solidarity, leading the lost to freedom's light, beacons of faith, hope, and charity. I speak as the lion's own storyteller, that the wine that comes from the new wine cellar. I speak as the voice of Wakanda pride. I am the panther on the black hand side. I speak for the pulpit's fiery preachers and the sacrificing grade school teachers, for the poets and prophets and overreachers, and the folks who sat in the colored bleachers. I speak for our children as yet unborn, so that history's lessons are newly worn, like Ghana kente in antelope horn, and Kwanzaa mats woven from husks of corn. I speak for the magic in Mama's kitchen, and the quilting circle that's carefully stitching, and Big Bob Gibson's fiery pitching, that's the wagon to which I'm hitching. I speak for the history of all our people, from the cotton fields to the church's steeple, from the still and silent gates at Goree to the Tuskegee Airmen's corps d'esprit, from the tales of Anansi, the clever spider, to Barack Obama, our White House insider, from the huddled masses who reach these shores to the ones who seek to open new doors. Thanks so much for your kind attention. I've enjoyed making this presentation to you, and I trust you've enjoyed watching it. Please remember that Black history is American history, and that it extends well beyond the 28 days that the month of February sometimes confines it to. It actually feels good that we're now in March and still having the conversation. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. You can always find me at www.brownskinpoet.net. Have a great afternoon, and thank you very much.
If they don't give you a seat at the table, bring a folding chair. Shirley Chisholm. This quote immediately stuck out to me. After I read it, the meaning stuck with me and clicked in my head. Chisholm is saying that when you are being discriminated against or left out, you have to force your way into the conversation. Just because they tell you your input isn't important, that is no reason to give up and stop trying to get your voice heard. After researching Chisholm, I learned that she was the first Black woman to be elected to the U.S. Congress. By learning this, I could see more clearly where her quote stems from. Because she was the first Black woman in Congress, she was probably shunned from and left out of a lot of conversations at the table, so she had to bring her folding chair up and make her voice heard anyway. Just because she wasn't invited, that didn't mean that she didn't have the right to go. In fact, she had more than the right to be in those conversations. She was an elected official. The people voted her in. Chisholm persevered through the oppression and did what she was there to do, and that was very inspiring to learn about.
Hi, I'm Sebastiano Sessa, a sophomore, and the quote that I chose is by Booker T. Washington, and it states, "Character's power." I think this quote says a lot, quite a lot actually, by only using 3 words, which is why I find it fascinating. When I first read it, I thought it stated that if you have a strong grasp of your ideals as a person, like political viewpoints and so forth, it makes you more credible as a person and allows for growth. People who have similar ideals as you will likely put their trust in you, see you as an ally, and maybe even a leader. I also thought that Booker T. Washington was trying to also talk about moral character. If you are seen as moral, you will also have more people that will follow you. Because at the end of the day, people, no matter what side they are on, unfortunately, think that they are doing the right thing. Nobody does something unless it is actually done with malice intent, of course, trying to be immoral and wrong people. After looking up Booker T. Washington and reconsidering what I just read, I was partially right, but I did miss a bit of context. I discovered that he was born as a slave, but after emancipation, he moved in with his family at Malden, West Virginia. He also worked really hard so that he could go to school because he was impoverished. After this, he decided that he would teach people like him, who didn't have the luxury of going to school. Due to his accomplishments, he was elected to be the head of the African American School at Tuskegee. I think I understand this quote a lot better now, given the new info I gained. He is saying that he would have not made it where he ended up in life if he did not hold on to his character. Like the quote states, character is power. He did not let the fact that he was born less fortunate than others stop him. He kept going, and he made sure he completed his goal of teaching people that were in a similar situation like him. Most specifically, helping African Americans find and get a proper education. In this quote, he is saying that to hold on to your moral character is one of the most important things you can do when fighting for a cause. Now that I think about it more, most people in history would have never made it far at all if they didn't do this. This quote is very important, and it sets kind of like a reminder for determination and continuing on.
Where it's gonna go. I need you to move. Please move. From the beginning, let me see if you remember it. 5, 6, 7, 8. Great job. Great job. Some people are getting that fast, yes? Is that a word? Yeah? Great job, people. No, I'm putting in. Great job. Great job. Great job. You know, it's just like that to take the chance of that, okay? You cannot just like, oh, I'm scared to do it. I was scared to do it before, but when I realized that I had to step my feet in and try to really keep my voice out, that's the way I get my scholarship. So sometimes I go to auditions and there were like 3,000 people in the audition, and they only need 5 people. And all these people are great dancers, and I'm like, why do they keep needing all these ideas? It's just like that to me. 5, 6, and again, 5, 6, 7, 8. We go right, and down, and up, down, and up, down, and up, down. Now jumping. Right, left, right, left. We go. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 8. Do it. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, wait a minute. 4, left side, more. 2, 3, left side. 1, 2, 3, and breathe. From the beginning, non-stop. Do you remember everything, everybody? Do you remember everything? You can say no. No? Okay, perfect. So after we finish doing the up, we travel sideways. 1, 2, and 4. That's the next process. 1. Now next step. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 1, 2. Wave it and 4 the sign. Left, 2, 3, and 4. That's all. From the TOP, from the top. Work it out. That's all, but I want to see you move. I'm not gonna help. Let me watch. 5, 6, 7, 8. Yeah. the last movement into it, and after that, I'll leave you by yourself. Last movement there. I think we should left to before we move. Put the legs up here. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 7, 8. 2, 3, and 4. 6, 7, 8. 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, and 4. 7, 8. From the beginning, and after that, we'll put you into your groups. You guys don't even know. You brought so much positivity right now. Now I feel very full. I'm sweating, and I feel like you are here with me. That's so great. Are you having fun? Oh, no, for real. Are you having fun? Oh, it's only 3 people class. Are you having fun? Now let's bring the fun out. Let's do this. Stand there. I'm going to put the mic down so I can hear it.
Hi, my name is Samara Wittakali.
And I'm Nathan Moreno.
I'm Gabrielle Yamamoto.
I'm Lily Anzalone.
And today we're going to be talking about Marsha P. Johnson.
So, who was Marsha P. Johnson? Marsha P. Johnson was an African-American transgender woman and drag performer and queer rights activist. She was credited with instigating the famous Stonewall riots in 1969, which went on to become what we now know as Pride. She co-founded the Street Transvestite Action Revolutionaries, also known as STAR, with fellow revolutionary and friend Celia Rivera. STAR worked to provide shelter and other services to homeless queer people in New York City, Chicago, California, and England. Marsha P. Johnson was also a tireless advocate for AIDS patients. She was endlessly flamboyant and larger than life. She was a staple of the New York Greenwich Village for 3 decades and became known as the mayor of Christopher Street. Over her lifetime, she was arrested over 100 times and she was shot once. Here's a quote that summarizes Marsha's ideals. How many years has it taken for people to realize that we are all brothers and sisters and human beings in the human race?
Next, we're going to talk about the timeline of Marsha P. Johnson's life. In 1945, Marsha was born the 5th of 7 children in Elizabeth, New Jersey. As early as 5 years old, Marsha began to experiment with girls' clothing, much to the chagrin of her heavily Christian and traditional parents, as well as the general public. In 1963, Marsha moved to New York after graduating high school. Homeless, with nothing but a bag of clothes and $15 to her name, she turns to prostitution and discovers drag. It was during this time that Marsha would find her people and develop her drag persona. Originally, she was just Black Marsha, and then she switched to Marsha P. Johnson. Johnson came from one of her favorite spots to eat, Howard Johnson's. And finally, there was the P, which she jokes stand for pay it no mind, as a response to those that would try and pry into her sexuality and gender. Marsha quickly became a prominent fixture of the queer community as a drag queen, serving the community and touring with the Hot Peaches. In 1969, the first brick at Stonewall is thrown, and Marsha found Star with Sylvia Rivera. We'll expand more upon this a little later into the presentation. In 1972, Marsha tours the world with popular theater company The Hot Peaches and models for Andy Warhol. Andy had been inspired by Marsha's eccentric and elaborate handmade looks. Warhol made his 1975 Polaroid portfolio, Ladies and Gentlemen, using her images as well as other drag queens and transgender people at the Gilded Grape nightclub. 1992, Marsha announces she has been HIV positive since 1990. Marsha has always been a vocal advocate for the rights and respect of HIV and AIDS positive people. She was an early member of ACT UP, but hadn't announced her confirmed positive status until 1992. 1994. At the age of 46, Marsha is found drowned in the Hudson River. She's found dead and police claim it was a suicide because of Marsha's turbulent mental condition. Close friends of Johnson, however, dispute these claims and believe that Marsha was murdered. A neighboring man was said to have gotten in an argument with her in the street, where he called her homophobic slurs. Days later, he was heard bragging at a bar that he had killed a drag queen named Marsha. Police, however, did not listen to this evidence and deemed the case unsolved. It was only until recently that police would open it again.
Who was there? And the contemporaries of Marsha. Next, we're going to discuss the people who fought alongside Marsha, and it's important to know that she wasn't alone. She was surrounded by many fellow people of color, queers, and drag queens in her fight. The most important are Sylvia Rivera, Storme Delavere, Randy Wicker, and Miss Major. Sylvia Rivera. She was a Puerto Rican trans bisexual woman who fought alongside Marsha and co-founded STAR, as well as the Gay Liberation Front. She was a tireless advocate against the exclusion of transgender people from the gay rights movement, and more specifically, the Sexual Orientation Non-Discrimination Act in New York. She was a voice for the rights of people of color, low-income queens, and the transgender community. On her deathbed, she met with Matt Foreman and Joe Grabars of the Empire State Pride Agenda to negotiate transgender inclusion in its agenda and political structures. Similar to Johnson, Rivera faced a great many challenges as a result of being a person of color, poor, a drag queen, a transgender woman, a former sex worker, and her involvement with drugs and addiction, homelessness, and incarceration. Randy Wicker. Born in 1938, Randy Wicker began his activism at a young age. He was roommates with Marsha P. Johnson, which led to his participation during the Stonewall Rebellion. After Stonewall, Randy joined the Gay Activist Alliance, and more recently, he has been advocating for Black Lives Matter. Sometimes he hadn't agreed with the sometimes violent tactics of Johnson and Rivera, but in the end, he understood that they were all fighting the same battle. Miss Major Griffin Gracie was a Black transgender elder and activist who had been fighting for the rights of transgender women of color for the past 40 years. She was a veteran of the Stonewall Rebellion, a former sex worker, and the survivor of Attica State Prison. The former longtime executive director of the San Francisco-based Transgender Variant Intersex Justice Project, which advocates for trans women of color in and outside of prison. She served on multiple HIV and AIDS organizations, including the Tenderloin AIDS Resource Center. Miss Major is still alive today and puts a lot of work into assisting transgender people who are disproportionately incarcerated in America. Next we have Storme Delavere. She was a biracial, cross-dressing butch lesbian known as the Rosa Parks of the NYC LGBT community. She worked as a bouncer at the Stonewall Inn on the night of the riot. She was rumored to be the one to throw the first punch at Stonewall. She was incredibly influential on the world of gender non-conforming women's wear years before it would come into fashion. Often worked as a bouncer and bodyguard for lesbian clubs, and here's a quote from one of her friends. She walked down the streets of downtown like a gay superhero. She was not to be messed with by any stretch of the imagination.
The Stonewall Riots, June 28, 1969. Members of the queer community were being targeted by NYC police. The anger came to a breaking point when, for the second time in a couple days, police returned to raid the Stonewall Inn and lit the place aflame. The community had had enough and started to fight back against the police. Marsha was called from a party in Uptown and came as quickly as she could to the scene where she waged war. The community rioted in the streets of NYC for several days. These riots would later come to birth what we know as the modern-day Pride Parades. Stonewall marks the turning point in the movement for queer liberation. The Stonewall Inn was a popular queer hotspot at the time. The event has been called many things: riots, rebellions, protests, etc. It's debatable whether or not Marsha really threw the first brick or shot glass at the riot, but that's not quite the point. The point is Marsha was there leading the charge. Marsha, by many accounts, climbed a lamppost and threw a heavy object inside a bag to shatter a police car window. This is a quote about the events that happened there. History isn't something you look back at and say it was inevitable. It happens because people make decisions that are sometimes very impulsive and of the moment, but these moments are cumulative realities.
Police initially dismissed the case as a suicide due to Marsha's often turbulent mental health, but close friends of Marsha said that she was not suicidal and noted the wound on the back of her head. Several people came forward with accounts that Marsha had gotten into a fight with a group of thugs and saw Marsha being harassed by a neighbor who called her slurs in the streets. The man later would brag in a bar that he had killed a drag queen named Marsha. Police dismissed this evidence. Police were uninterested in investigating her death because they thought it was just another case of a gay black man. Due to outcry from the community, police eventually reopened the case as unsolved in 2002, and eventually in 2012 shifted to possible homicide.
And finally, we have the legacy of Marsha P. Johnson. After Marsha's passing, the community began to forget the impact of her. This was a deliberate act by racists and transphobes within the community who wished to distance themselves from her. White gay men would go on to try and claim pride for themselves. As recently as 2015, the producers of the movie Stonewall came under fire for pushing aside the transgender people and people of color who led the riots for a masculine white gay man who they used as the protagonist who threw the first brick. Nearly 25 years later, the community is still working to spread awareness about Marsha and all that she has done for us. As of 2021, there are sculptures of her and Sylvia Rivera being constructed in their hometown of Greenwich Village. In 2015, Marsha P. Johnson Institute was established to protect the rights of transgender and gender nonconforming communities. Marsha's work has saved countless LGBT youth and paved the way for the community we have today. And finally, we have an inscription written about Marsha. It reads, "If I keep dressing up like this, I'll save the world from nuclear apocalypse. But will anyone love me for it? I'll have to save the world anyway. I know what looks good." Thank you so much for joining us for this presentation about queer activist and revolutionary Marsha P. Johnson.
There comes a time when we hit a certain call, when the world must come together as one. There are people dying. Oh, when it's time to lend a hand to life, the greatest gift of all.
We can't go on pretending day by day
that someone somehow will soon make a change.
We are all a part of God's great big family, and it's true, you know, love is all we need. We are the world. We are the children. We are the ones to make a brighter day, so let's stop giving. There's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. It's true, we'll make a better day, just you and me. Well, sit in your heart, oh, so they know that someone cares.
so their cries for help will not be in vain.
We can't let them suffer. No, we cannot turn away.
Right now, they need a helping hand. No someone down. We are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day, so let's start giving.
Oh, there's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives.
If you would make a better day, just you and me.
When you're down and out, and there seems no hope at all.
But if you just believe, there's no way we can fall.
Well, I realize that change can only come when we stand together as one. We are the world. We are the world. We are the children. We are the children. We are the ones who make a brighter day. So let's start giving.
Gotta start giving.
There's a choice to make. We're saving our own lives.
That is true.
We make a better day. Just you and me. We are the world.
We are the ones who make a better day. There's a choice we're making. We're saving our own lives. It's you we make a better day. Just you and me. We are the ones. There's a choice we're making.
Hello, my name is Paul DeLeva, and I'm principal of Medford High School and Medford Vocational Technical High School. I want to also welcome everyone to Black History Month. As you know, I've always said that we are all Mustangs, but Mustangs come in different shapes, sizes, colors, and creeds. And as we understand everyone's differences, we become a very strong herd. And that's why Mustangs is our mascot. What we've done in the past is we've always had a diversity week as well as a Black History Month assembly. And during that time, we got to learn things about poets as well as fashion, step dance, lots of different activities that we had done during the assembly. This year, due to the pandemic, we've had to do things a little bit differently. Every morning, we're able to share a fact that's student read, as well as a historical person who also comes from Medford and represents our Black community. Students, again, read this in the announcements, and it's also posted in our morning email updates so that students that are remote can also get the fact that is being posted. Also, during this time, which we've never been able to do before, we've had 6 ethno-Haitian dance assemblies for every grade and every in-person cohort. We also did what we could to stream it so that students had the ability that were remote to see what was going on. And we couldn't have it done without our outside vendor, Mr. John Apollone, who really led each grade and really got everybody to participate. And we were able to do this very safely. So having it 6 times, 2 times a week per grade, really gave us a chance to really express Black History Month this February. So I'm very pleased with what we've done, and I think we can always just grow and keep growing from there. And I'd like to always welcome everybody to celebrate their diversity here at Medford High School and Medford Vocational Technical High School.